Hi, Dale. How are you?
I'm good, Destin. How are you?
Great. I want to welcome everyone to our first Lord and Smith Commission, where Dale and Destin, we talk about the issues that matter in the political world, and this is our very first episode. So tonight, I think we'd be remiss if we did not talk about what happened on the weekend. If you could inform our viewers, Dale, what happened on the weekend?
The NDP held a leadership convention.
The longest leadership convention in the history of the world. I think it clocked in around what, 14 hours?
12.
12?
12.
I wasn't there. I was at home watching on the couch. I gave up before the all critical last ballot, but it felt like a long, long day. So my hat's off to those people that actually had to cover it and were there in the thick of things.
Yeah, I also wasn't there, and I was also covering it from the comfort of my sofa, but I watched almost all 12 hours and was possibly a little bit crazy by the end of it.
I think a lot of people were crazy by the end of it. So let's start there.
Right.
We've talked about the length. I think we should talk a little bit about the outcome. I think by now we all know that Thomas Mulcair is now the official leader of the opposition representing the NDP. But I think we need to back things up a bit and start at the first ballot. So after the first ballot, it was clear that Nikki Ashton finished last, followed by Paul Dewar.
Martin Singh and then
Martin Singh and then Paul Dewar. Excuse me. What were some of your thoughts after that first ballot wrapped up?
I was actually surprised that Martin Singh was second last. I figured that at least because Nikki Ashton was a sitting MP that she would have gotten a little further along. I was a little bit surprised that Paul Dewar was as low as he was, again because he's a sitting MP who's quite popular with a lot of the NDP rank and file. And I guess I was somewhat surprised that Nathan Cullen had made it all the way to third, given that his message deviates from orthodoxy in that he's trying to draw in more support from outside the party and running these joint nominations, which is a mathematically fraught proposal to begin with, but it sounds good to a certain base. So I was surprised that found as much traction as it did.
Well, and I'm glad you brought Nathan Cullen's name up. I think we should talk about him at this point. So, like you, a lot of people were a little bit surprised that he came in third. And for a while there, in the 6 billion hours between the third and fourth ballot, the second and third ballot, there was a real chance that he could have come in higher than that. There was a lot of speculation at the time. Now that he's not third, and as you mentioned, I won't call it unite the right, but he's trying to bring together sort of principles from the Liberal Party and the NDP Party. What do you think the role for him is going to be going forward?
It's an interesting question. I think that he's going to need to be given a fairly prominent portfolio. I'm going to guess that it's likely going to be environment because that was what he based a lot of his narrative on during the campaign, was this whole fighting the Enbridge pipeline that's going to be going through BC. And I think that's probably where they're going to try and make him shine, is by really getting him out there and giving his personal tale of this is my home, I'm going to fight for it, and really just play that up for the camera and for the base.
Okay, so we covered Nathan Cullen, Brian Topp. What does the future hold for Mr. Topp within the NDP?
That's a very interesting question, because what a lot of people I don't think realized throughout this convention is Brian Topp was one of the very central figures in the Leighton, I don't know if I want to call it regime, but within the Leighton circle. Brian Topp was one of the people who recruited Leighton to run for the party leadership back in 2003, I think. And it was Topp and McGrath and Brad Levine and a lot of these other central figures who very much stayed part of the core of the party through those years. And all through every single time they had an election, their seat count went up. They'd always attribute it to the fact that they had this core team who was always there. It didn't change it up every time like other parties did. And that was what they saw as their strength. And so with Brian Topp now out of the leadership, position. He no longer has that same position in the center of the party mechanics that he used to. I think it's going to be very difficult for him to try and find a spot in the new Mulcair era, especially as all these backroom shakeups are starting to happen now. Brad Levine is resigned as the party's national director. Anne McGrath is staying on as chief of staff only until June, just so that she can make the transition to Mulcair's people. And then she's out of there. And with Top out of there as well, I think it's going to change the backroom dynamics of the party a lot. And Top, he still says he's going to run, but we don't know where that's going to be. If there happens to be a by-election, will he move to wherever that is? Is he going to wait for the next election? Is he going to wait for a Quebec seat like he said he wanted to do? Or the fact that he's no longer in the leadership position, is he going to try and find one in Toronto, which is closer to where he is now? I guess we'll have to wait and see.
And I think that's probably the most critical point of all this. Where does Brian Top fit into the entire, to use your word, regime? But one last point that I wanted to bring up about the convention, and I think it has a lot to do with the things that we're talking about now. What's the future for Top? What's the future for Cullen? As a casual observer watching the convention, it was a little bit frustrating for me that no candidate was willing to make a recommendation to their supporters following their elimination from each ballot. I have my own thoughts on that, but I'm curious to hear what yours are.
A lot of it has to do with this notion of unity within the party and maintaining the big happy family. I don't want to call it a front, but it's certainly that's the what they put out to the rest of the public is that the NDP is a lot more united internally. You don't see a lot of the same not divisive, but you don't see a lot of disagreement publicly on policy issues that you would in other parties.
But is that giving the public a wrong impression? I mean, the fact that it's not discussed in front of the cameras and it wasn't very, there was a concerted effort, it seemed, to just have us all get along during the convention. That would indicate either one or two things. They're either fighting constantly behind the scenes or they really do love each other that much, which I don't think is a realistic view.
I think it's somewhere in the middle, actually. I think there are some particularly strong internal divisions, and a lot of that actually came out a little while ago with some statements that Libby Davies had made, and Tom Mulcair wanted her reined in, and there was this closed door battle that happened, and Davies eventually came on top, and there was a bit of tension around that. And so these things do happen within the party. For example, at their last policy convention, the idea to remove democratic socialism from the preamble of the Constitution. And it was so contentious an issue that they didn't want to be seen to be fighting about it. So and Brian Top, being the president of the party at the time, shuffled it off to the back stage and said, we're going to talk about this on the national executive for another couple of years, and we'll maybe revisit this the next policy convention 2 years hence. And so rather than having to let a more divisive policy issue get out in the open, they're more liable to keep that discussion internal. And I think that's part of what we're seeing with why nobody wanted to give an opinion, because they all knew that we're going to have to look at each other across the caucus table tomorrow morning, and nobody wanted to hurt anyone's feelings.
Well, I mean, regardless of whether or not anyone wanted to hurt anyone's feelings, the bottom line is that Thomas Mulcair is the winner.
He is.
He is now the official leader of the opposition. I want you to talk a little bit about some of the things that he needs to do in order to move the party forward. And when I say move the party forward, they've been the official opposition since May of 2011.
Yeah.
But many will argue that they really haven't been in opposition since that time. So in order to make them a credible opposition, what are some of maybe the top three things that Mulcair has to take care of immediately moving forward?
Okay, well, the very top thing that he needs to do is to start professionalizing his presentation, especially within the House of Commons. I mean, you may have noticed during his victory speech on Saturday night, he didn't even take advantage of the teleprompter that was in front of him that he was offered. Instead, it was reading the notes on the lectern in front of him.
I heard he doesn't like teleprompters. It's a thing he's got.
And today in question period, it was paper with his script in front of him or on the desk, and he was reading off of it while standing up.
Okay.
And so if he really wants to be seen as credible and really push his image ahead, he's going to have to learn how to speak off the cuff, because Bob Rae does it brilliantly, and Stephen Harper does it pretty good too. Albeit Harper's is a bit more of a shrugging kind of way. He'll stand up and button his jacket and just kind of shrug off any comment that comes his way. And sit back down, but he doesn't do it with a script in front of him. Okay. So I think that's something Mulcair is really going to have to address first thing.
Now, you're talking specifically about his professionalism, but what about the professionalism overall of the party? And in this sense, I'm referencing, and you being in the gallery every day, have you noticed everything with the rookie MPs, the way the party performs as a whole?
I think that message goes for across the party, because it's really hard to take a question seriously when an MP is delivering outrage when they've got their script in front of them right here. Why don't you like seniors? You hate seniors, but their script is right in front of their face. So it makes it really hard to take it seriously, especially sitting up there in the gallery.
For sure. That and checking your makeup in your BlackBerry.
Well, that too. Other things that Brian Tott needs to do is Mulcair needs to do is he needs to make sure he's not going to start alienating English Canada, because we've already started seeing he's starting off QP in French. He's answering most French reporters in scrums more often than he is English reporters, and that's something that could come back and bite him amongst his own base in the Western provinces, because I mean they do have a fairly strong base in BC. There's still a fairly strong base in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, but unless he actually starts engaging with them in English, I think he runs a real danger of making everyone think that he is now focused on making the party into a Quebec party. And I guess the last thing would be to carry on with his plan of modernizing the party's language, whether that is changing democratic socialism to social democracy in the party's constitution, or just any of their particular modes of discourse that might sound a bit still somewhat 60s in their protest vernacular.
Okay. The last point that I wanted to raise with you is that coming out of the Leadership Convention, Mulcair positioned himself as someone that is going to be the antithesis to Stephen Harper. However, I think we would be remiss to not talk about how he basically did not talk to press the day of the Leadership Convention.
Or throughout much of the leadership itself.
That is true. And outside of his two sort of major speeches, he sort of gave his acceptance speech, if you will, on Saturday, and then they had a press conference on Sunday. And your point, reading off his notes, he seems to be more in alliance with Stephen Harper in the way he's treating the media at this point.
And I think that's a very good point. He does seem to have learned a few lessons from the Harper media strategy. And I mean, we noticed that a little bit with the NDP. Once they became official opposition, they started closing down on questions a little sooner. Occasionally, they'd start playing the 10-minute, 15-minute late game that Harper likes to play with the media at press conferences and scrums. And with Mulcair's media control throughout the leadership campaign, I think that's something we're going to see more of. And he's talked about running a more structured and disciplined opposition office, and I think that's going to be part of it, is much stronger message discipline.
Okay. and I may be alone in this view, but I'm one of the few people that think leadership conventions are actually a way to advertise to the people out there that may not as yet be a member of your party.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe thinking NDP, but not sure if they want to drink the Kool-Aid. Based on the performance of the convention this weekend, how would you give it a grade in terms of appealing to just the regular casual observer of politics that may not necessarily be a diehard NDPer, but
Right.
someone who was watching and was hoping to get some ideas about what the party stands for, etc.?
That's a hard question for me to answer because I'm one of those junkies who's there every day and who knows all the messages. But I do have to say I was rather unimpressed with all the various leadership presentations because a lot of them weren't done very professionally. Like their videos were overexposed and the sound balance was bad, which could be just the sound system they had going, but they couldn't time things properly, things like that. And it didn't really give anyone a lot of confidence that, wow, these people really know what they're doing. On top of that, there was a tendency to speak in platitudes for a lot of it, which I couldn't say how well that was, how well the general public responds to that kind of messaging. But, for someone who follows these things, it was frustrating beyond belief when they would offer the same platitude over and over and not really explain what they meant by whatever the message was at the time. Okay. What did kind of shake things up was Nathan Cullen's initial presentation there. Mm-hmm. No multimedia, just him on the stage, kind of going on freewheeling. Mm-hmm. And I think that actually demonstrated a bit more to the public and helped connect them to his message a little better than some of the more ostentatious presentations.
And you may have just answered this question, but regardless of winners and losers, was there one shining star that you wanted to mention out of the whole convention this past weekend?
Not really.
Okay.
No, because I think in the end, nobody really acquitted themselves, at least in my own vision, speaking as a junkie who follows these things.
Okay. Well, 7 days from now we'll chat again, and maybe we can pick a star of the week, and maybe we can pick someone who very much needs improvement. So that said, this is the Lord and Smith Commission. Stay tuned. We'll have more political thoughts coming up 7 days from now. Take care.
Thanks.